Can you pass on your trauma to your kids? In other words, is it possible not to pass on the damage that you've experienced as a child onto your own kids? That's what I want to unpack today. And I want to do that by breaking it down into the kinds of trauma or difficult experiences that you may have lived through as a child. So first of all, there are the belief systems that you would have picked up as a result of the way that your parents parented you. So these may be self-limiting beliefs. If, for example, you weren't allowed to express yourself in the way that you needed to for as long as you needed to, in the kind of way that you needed to. If you weren't allowed to do that, and if those feelings weren't validated or mirrored back to you, you may well have learned that they weren't acceptable, that they weren't normal, that they were the wrong reaction to have. If that's what happened to you, and that then created self-limiting beliefs such as, I don't matter, my feelings aren't trustworthy, it is dangerous to be vulnerable, anything like that, then yes, you can absolutely pass on those beliefs to your children, because if that's what you believe about yourself, then even if you don't want to be passing it on, then that's the kind of subliminal messages that your kids will be picking up. Because don't forget that we can say one thing, we can act in one thing, but kids pick up on our energy. And if your energy is not in alignment with that, then they will pick up your energy and they will follow that more than what you're saying or doing. And if the two aren't in alignment, that's super confusing with kids. And that's often what I help mamas deal with, the confusing, often conflicting messages that they receive from their parents. So can you pass that on to your kids? Of course you can, unless you do the inner work to understand what these self-limiting beliefs are, how they affect the way that you are in the world, how they govern what kind of triggers you feel about certain situations or behaviors. This is the key to working out what your self-limiting beliefs, fears, judgments are, by relying on your triggers. And I've done lots of other vlogs on that, so please check other ones out on how to track your trigger. But to suffice to say in this video that if you don't do the work to understand what your self-limiting beliefs are, you will carry those on. In terms of actions, can you pass on the trauma that you experienced or the difficult adverse experiences that you lived through? Yes, again, you can. Because even though we may not want to act in the way that our parents did, for example, in terms of corporal punishment, being slapped, being spanked, being hit, whatever it was that we experienced, or other things, the way that we may have been forced to finish what was on our plate, or whatever else it is, can we pass that on? Yes, even if we don't want to, because when we're triggered, when we're basically in a trauma response zone, when we're in the red zone and we're not using our executive functioning, and this is something that we don't choose to do. If you're in the red zone and you're super triggered, you're super overwhelmed or tired or hungry or stressed, then you can't use this part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, which is what allows you to think about the consequences of your actions, whether it's a rational thing to do, whether it's a logical thing to do. This executive functioning part of the brain is completely bypassed when we're super triggered. And you go back to a very earlier, more ancient part of the brain, which is where the memories of what you experienced or heard or saw as a child are stored, and you will just reenact them. So if you used to be hit and absolutely don't want to hit your children, but you are super triggered, it may well be that you just hit them without even realizing it. And I know that I used to do that at the very beginning. I absolutely don't want to be doing that to my children, and I don't anymore. But at the very beginning, I did used to slap them because that's what happened to me. That's one of the things that happened to me. So we can end up doing things we really don't want to do, which is what our mothers or our fathers did to us when they were triggered. And that's not conscious. It's not something we can stop unless we do the inner work to understand that this is what's happening, and to work on understanding how our bodies go into this red zone. What are the signs that our body gives us as it's nearing this red zone, so that we can work on calming ourselves back down and coming back into a place where this prefrontal cortex can be used for us to think about the consequences of our actions. So can we pass on our beliefs? Yes, absolutely. Can we pass on our trauma in terms of actions? Absolutely. The solutions to stopping doing both are to do the inner work, to understand why you react the way that you do and how this is tied up to your past and the way that you were treated as a child. I want to add a third point, and that is not to worry. You can also undo whatever damage that you have done in the past. It would be amazing if we could go back in time and be the people that we are now 10 years ago or 5 years ago or whenever it was that you first became a mother. I sometimes wish that myself, but it's not possible. And what is possible is to start doing things right now, to start trying better now. And I want to reassure you that not only can you undo the damage, because the great thing about our brains is that, I'm sure you've heard the word neuroplasticity, they change all the time. You can rewire connections. So whatever connections you may have established in your children, you can undo, you can replace with healthier ones, with different beliefs. They can have different beliefs about themselves and about the way the world works if you start putting new habits into place. In the same way that we can do the same thing for us. That is exactly what I help mums to do, to rewire those connections that have led to those self-limiting beliefs, so that they then fill themselves with self-love, self-worth, self-belief, and self-confidence. So we can do the same with our children. And I want to remind you that however bad you think you may be, or whatever damage you think you may have done, it is never going to be as bad as what you experienced at the hands of your parents. Why? Because I bet that when you make a mistake and you treat your children out of alignment with your values, I bet you say sorry. I'm sure that you say sorry for what you did. Did your parents ever say sorry? Mine never did. So I'm guessing that yours didn't. And if they didn't, maybe they didn't do it in the way that you're doing it. So yes, you might be damaging them, or you may have done in the past, but I bet you say sorry. That is the repair needed to balance that action out. And again, when you do something that you regret or that you know you shouldn't have done, do you explain yourself? Are you authentic with your children? Do you say, Mummy shouldn't have done that? Mummy was feeling triggered. I was angry because you did this, and I'm really trying hard not to do that anymore. And this is part of my challenge, and I want to be a better mum for you, and that's what I'm working on. I bet you do. Again, did your parents ever say that to you? I'm thinking it's probably unlikely that they did. Therefore, whatever damage you're doing, the fact that you're repairing it straight away or shortly after with an explanation from the heart, an authentic, vulnerable, opening up to the possibility of change and to forgiveness, that's everything. That is everything. And that doesn't create the damage which unfortunately we experienced. So to recap, can you pass on your trauma? Can you pass on the damage that you experienced? Absolutely. But you're not going to be passing it on in the same way, the reasons that I've just explained. And even if you were, which I know you're not, you can undo that. You can undo that by doing the inner work to understand where these reactions are coming from and heal them in yourself, so that you don't continue to do them, so that you are no longer triggered by the same things and are able to be in this far less volatile, less resilient, more resilient place where you can stay connected to your sense of calm. Hope that was helpful. If it was, please check out my website for lots more tips and tools in blogs and vlogs on laviniabrown.com. And I'd love to hear your comments and thoughts on what I've said. Comment below.